Hey legends, it's Leslie here from Essentially Active, and it's time for another ultra running race recap. And this time it's the 2025 Ultra Trail Kosciuszko, which for those of you that have been following for a while know that I've done this event multiple times. And so I've run the 100K at Kosci 4 times now. And 4 times it's been a different course, we've had different conditions, and it's been a different adventure each and every time. Now, some of you might not think this, but a lot of people actually come to me and say, Leslie, you're nuts, you're crazy, I can't imagine running 100 Ks. I can't imagine being out there for 20 odd hours or 24 hours or however long it might be. I just can't fathom it. And so it's quite easy for people to say, if they can't imagine it, that I'm a bit crazy. But when you go to these events, you realise that there's at least 1,000 or so other people doing the same thing that you do. So it's kind of cool to be able to do this in an event situation, because you do realise that you're not alone. And part of the reason I do these things is because we need to explore our limits, and it's not necessarily just physical limits, but it's where your mind goes to during an event like this. It's like when you feel like you've got nothing left, how do you cope with that? How do you respond, like physically, mentally? How do you prepare for any of this? And it's a very much a doing hard things moment. And I think we learn a lot about who we are, and that's part of why I keep doing it. But the other reason around it, and part of the reason why I share my race recaps, is that if someone like me can do this stuff, so can you. Just throwing it out there. It is plodding. It is one foot after the other. And it translates into life. So if this inspires you, reach out, take that step. You've got this. You absolutely do. Okay, into the race recap itself. Yay! So as always, the race starts on a Friday morning. This year, as last year, it starts at Perisher Village. And in the lead up, the weather had been looking pretty wintry, actually, even though it's practically summer in the Australian Alps. And there was a lot of snow up on the main range. And so in the week prior, they had changed the course. So instead of doing a loop around the main range, we were doing an out and back and still going to the summit of Kosci, which was cool. So it was, they say, a little bit less elevation, a little bit less vert. The thing that I was looking forward to is, compared to going around back of the main range, coming back down Rawson's Pass and all of that back to Charlotte's Pass was something that I knew would be a bit of a relief compared to what we had in the past with lots of cheese graters. But I'll get into that. So we had a rolling start this year, and when I say a rolling start, we would roll through in waves, and I was in the last wave, and so despite the start time of 7:30, I didn't probably cross the line till about 7:50, almost 8 o'clock. We do a loop of Perisher, and then we head out along some single track that goes from Perisher to Charlotte's Pass village. Now, this track, you end up with a little bit of a conga line, not in a bad way at all, but just by the nature of single track and being early in the race. mind you, the loop around Perisher really does spread everyone out quite nicely. So there's no dramas there. It's kind of like a happy conga line, if that makes sense. Now, the trail here, we've got a combination of single track that contains like little stepping stones of granite or slabs of granite, and then we've got sections of cheese grater. Now, when we talk about cheese grater, these are metal paths that are raised above the vegetation to protect it because it gets quite wet and you've got snow and so forth. And because of the snowy, icy conditions up on the top of the world here in Australia, they've got some metal serrations. And so the reason we call them cheese graters is because if you fall on them, we as people become the cheese. Now, early on, people were running on them. I do not run on them. It's not recommended you run on them, but hey, we can't stop anybody running on them. But I always walk the cheese graters. Now, the thing I had forgotten to mention just now was there were some quite strong, gusty winds, and they had been so for the days previously. And then on the morning of race day, their winds were insane. Like, you're walking along or you're running along the track and you're being blown off the track by the wind, and there's like huge gusts of wind. Ironically, I put on a couple of kilos in the last few months in the lead up to this race, and whilst I didn't necessarily feel heavier, because I knew I'd put it on, I was like, yay, a couple of extra kilos to help me fight against the wind and stay upright. That was the emotion I had there. So what a way to spend putting on a few kilos, hey, legends? You got to flip it, right? You got to flip it. Positive mindset. But then I started to notice on both the cheese grater and the stones, drops of blood. There was blood everywhere. So I could tell people had been, like, I'd seen them falling, but seen them running, but then I could tell that they had fallen. And then there were some instances where I had overtaken a couple of people that you could see that, they had done some damage, which is pretty hard on them when it's so early in the race. Coming into Charlotte's Pass, I came in probably a good 15 minutes, 20 minutes faster than the previous year. So I was quite pleased with that. I pushed hard. My husband, Kilnar, he's my crew in these events for the 100K, and he got me in and out. We literally have like a system in place where, like, in his backpack, he's got just what I need, and that is a second set of soft flasks that I can put in the front of my pack with my electrolytes, and a couple of bites of food. And so for me, because I eat real food, that is like a yogurt pouch, and this time it was like salami and cheese. And so I had the yogurt pouch, salami and cheese. Now, the toilet situation is always a bit of a challenge in these busy races for females, I find, mainly because there's nowhere, like, on the side of the trail if you need to, like, do a bush wee. There's nowhere to really do that, and that's okay. I try and take advantage of the toilets at the aid stations, but at Charlotte's Pass Village, there was like a massive queue. It was taking forever. So I kind of said, oops, I'm just going to go. So I told hubby, hey, I'm just going to go. And so I did. And out of there, I think I got out of there in maybe 8 minutes or something, which is pretty cool. And then you've got straight uphill to go to the lookout, and then more of an uphill all the way to Kosci Summit. So from that point, we've got like 12K roughly of pretty constant uphill. So my approach there was pretty much hike it out really strong. And so I maintained that, and I did that and I was like ticking it off. What I did do when I got to Charlotte's Pass Lookout, so whilst there's a checkpoint there, there's also some general public toilets, and so I actually ducked into there on the trail. So there was no queue. So that was a win-win. And then off I went again on my way. Initially, we have like this wide fire trail, but really well groomed, because basically they have to redo the trails every year because of all the snow. And you've being in out and back this time, because they changed the course, you got to see everyone coming back down from the summit. The interesting thing here, right, it is windy. It is coming in the side of your face. All you're trying to do is like put like your buff to cover it up. And then all of a sudden, already at this point, even though it's probably only 3 or 4 hours into the race, all around the mouth, like the skin is starting to get sore from the wind. And of course, the nose drips, and it's particularly annoying. So you're just trying to protect the face, and so the wind's coming at you. And so it's also just up, up, up. And even though you're making solid progress, like mentally at that point, I felt quite low, but like when you looked around, everyone going up was feeling quite low. And so that was, knowing that you weren't the only one feeling that way was good. It was kind of just good in terms of a check-in, that you're not anywhere that's not you're not anywhere that's going to be a negative impact on the race, if that makes sense. But you're seeing all the people coming down and they've got smiles on their face. So the thing that kept me going on the up there is knowing that, hey, I'm going to love coming back down. And so for me, I try and find on that section, because I really do my 100K races checkpoint by checkpoint, and I really try and find something to hold on to and to look forward to. And so in this instance, I was looking forward to coming back down from the summit, which is great. Now, I mentioned the wind. The thing I noticed in this section of the race were the crows. Now, there's lots of crows around, and there always are. But the ones that were out and up and flying around, they were playing in the wind. Now, this wind was super strong, and for them, they'd be flapping and going nowhere. They'd be flapping their wings going nowhere. But then all of a sudden, they'd take a bit of a rest. They'd go into a bit of a formation. They'd fly and they'd swoop. Then they'd come back and they'd fly and they'd swoop. Then they'd land on the ground, shake it off. Then they'd get up and then they'd swoop and play in the wind. And I thought, what a cool way, like, to deal with conditions. Because often in ultras, it's the conditions that can dictate a lot of stuff, right? But we can choose how we mentally approach the conditions. And when I saw the crows doing that, that for me was a trigger to say, stop, right? Hang on, Leslie, hang on, right? There's more than one way to look at what's going on with the wind, right? The crows are having fun. I'm like, be more like the crow. And this then made me think back to moments where I've been out running in the rain, and like you look around and you've got people out walking their dogs in the rain, and the people that are walking the dog, the humans, are like miserable because it's raining. The dogs don't care. They're having a ball. They're just happy to be out running or walking, and they love being in the rain. They don't care that they're getting wet. They're fine. And so watching the crows in this instance play in the wind was like, yeah, this is cool. Like in the instance where I would often say to people, be like the doggies in the rain, it's like be like the crows in the wind. And so I would just adjust the buff to protect the skin, and you just keep going. I'm using my poles because for me, poles are life in my ultras, and I just kept going. So I loved going up to the summit, only in the sense of being on top of the world, like getting to the summit is kind of cool. Now, to get there, we had to cross a snowdrift, and so the awesome peeps associated with UTK had cut like these stairs in the snowdrift to help us get through, which was really cool. I was really grateful for my poles because the snow was getting slushy and slippery, and the poles helped give that traction, which was great. But once we got past the snow, we actually had quite a long section of cheese grater. So then I actually put the poles away and just power hiked up to the top. And up the top, there was a photographer, could get a photo on the summit, and they had music playing, and it was the Proclaimers 500 miles, and I danced around to that, and I kind of relished in the moment on being on top of Australia. And you do feel like you're on top of the world, right? Because you know that it's the tallest peak on mainland Australia, and yeah, it feels pretty damn cool. After that, I walked back down the hill. Why did I walk down the hill in this instance instead of running down? Because it's cheese graters, and I don't run the cheese graters. Once we got past the snowdrift again, because I had to then go down the snowdrift, then we had stone and gravel surfaces, and I could run as much as I could back down to the Charlotte's Pass checkpoint where Kilner was waiting again, and we had another real quick turnaround where I used the bathroom again, and then off I went towards Guthrie. So the way that hubby and I work the aid stations for Kosci is that he catches the bus to Charlotte's Pass and he meets me at checkpoints 1 and 2. We decide to skip him coming to checkpoint 3, which is Guthrie, mainly because the travel time, not so much from Charlotte's Pass, but the travel time between checkpoints 3 and 4, which is Guthrie and Perisher, is quite challenging. It's not necessarily safe for crew unless you've got 2 sets. Now, so I get him to skip Guthrie and then meet me at Perisher. From a practicality purpose, it's awesome because he can park at Perisher, catch the bus to Charlotte's Pass, and then go back to Perisher and wait for me. At any point in time, I'm like, take advantage as crew of any downtime and try and get some naps in and make sure you're eating, which he's pretty good at doing. Now, between Charlotte's Pass, so checkpoint 2 and checkpoint 3, Charlotte's Pass and Guthrie, for me, this is a combination of single track and then there's lots of cheese grater. Interestingly, this is the one section of the course that has been there every single year. No, last 3 years, the most common. Anywho, I have done it in a variety of times, from 2 hours and 10 to 1 hour 45. And I think part of the difference in those timings is that not in any year is the timing match exactly the same place, and that's okay. But again, I walk the cheese graters. This year I didn't have a lot of energy for the shuffling and the running in between, but I had some great conversations with people in this section, which I loved because let's face it, it's about community. Now, there were so many people doing Kosci for the first time, but even more so doing their first 100K race, which was so cool. I talked to a couple of people who had fallen on the cheese graters and they were struggling with a bit of pain and so forth. But they were doing okay. They were pushing through. Not everyone could. There were people that ended up in hospital, broken arms, everything. And in fact, on one section of cheese grater in this part of the course, I saw literally chunks of flesh, not just drops of blood on the cheese grater. So that was pretty off-putting. I think mainly the reason I hadn't seen them on previous years was because of rain, and because there wasn't rain this year on this section, you really noticed every drop of blood, every bit of flesh that was on the cheese grater, and like that's just, yeah, the way it is. Interestingly, a couple of people that were doing their first kosci, first 100K, mentioned to me that they didn't realise falling on the cheese graters would be so bad. Like they'd heard the advice and kind of discounted it, thinking it's not such a bad thing. But many DNFs each year at kosci are because of falling on the cheese graters. And it's not always because of running. Some people walk on the cheese graters and DNF and still fall. But let's face it, we've got trail running shoes with lugs that can catch and you can fall. Anyway, not to harp on about that, but the interesting part was that how people just didn't fully understand the consequences and how bad cheese graters are. So I just kind of want to emphasise they bloody hurt, and we do become the cheese if we fall on them, okay? So it's not to say, you do you tackle them the way you want, but people do underestimate it and do come off second best. Now, getting into Guthiga, like I was feeling okay, but the wind was getting to me a little bit. I wasn't really able to brush it off and think about the crows during this section. And you have to go upstairs to get into the aid station, and all I wanted was to get out of the wind for a bit and have a cup of coffee. I had trouble sort of finding stuff, but at the aid station they had some soup, they had some coffee. So I had that, and then off I went. I probably spent a bit too long there, but part of that was to be out of the wind for a bit. But I was quite good in the end of just sort of deciding, yep, up and at them and out I go. And then I've got the next section is mostly via trail between Guthiga and Perisher. And this is a section where you kind of see it as the juxtaposition to the previous segment, because the previous segment's got lots of cheese graters. This one doesn't. So this is the one where you have to channel, like you're in a Madagascar. I like to move it, because to me, this section without any cheese graters, you got to hustle. So what I do is I put on some music, and I don't usually use music during races, but I know that for this section it helps me a lot. So I put music on just for this section, and we go from Guthiga to Perisher. During that process, I had to stop and put my high vis on because it was getting dark. And then I got into Perisher, which was awesome. So good, because I always love seeing my crew. In this instance, I was feeling tired. I was feeling really emotional. And not that I wanted to stop, but yeah, I wasn't in a joyous place. And I was very grateful to see my husband, and all I really wanted was a cuddle and just to kind of know that it was all right. But the other thing I did at Perisher, being an indoors aid station, was great because you're out of the wind. And I think this time you kind of, in those indoor ones, you spent a bit longer there because you got out of the wind. But I took off my daytime clothes and put on my nighttime clothes. Not that the clothes are significantly different, but I like to get the sweaty clothes off before nightfall, just so that I don't get the chill in the alpine air. And so I did that, and then out I went. And then now it was time to have a net downhill section to Bullocks. And so this is single track with switchbacks, combination of cheese graters, single trail, runnable single trail. Last year, this section was like a muddy waterfall. This year it was good. And so I was able to just keep going and push through. And I actually had a really good run down into Bullock's Flat. And again, in Bullock's Flat, it was the standard refuel, food, toilet, and then off I went. Not really a lot to say there, except that I just was able to keep some rhythm going there, which was really good. Now, after leaving Bullock's Flat, you go along the Thredbo Valley Trail to Thredbo with a non-crewed aid station at Garago in the middle. Now, this is mountain bike trails, and it's literally up, down, around, switchbacks, undulating. We're starting to talk about a net uphill, okay? So compared to Bullock's Flat, Thredbo is net uphill. This section of trail I know super well. I've run it a lot. I don't always enjoy it, but I know that at this point it is run the downs, walk the ups, run the downs, walk the ups. And if it's flat, try and get like 20 or 40 steps of running and then walk a bit and just try and get as much of that running action in as possible, because I know that once I get to Thredbo, it's up and down with not a lot of rhythm or running. Like, it's just the way it is. Again, got into Garago, got some coffee, had a bit of food, then off I went. What I really loved there is there was music at the aid station. I kind of danced around, which was quite cool. I was feeling tired, so I just kept going. Now, what I love about the next section, and probably the whole of the Thredbo Valley Trail, but particularly from Garago to Thredbo, is the fact that you really notice these little markers to Thredbo, or these little markers, safety markers that they have, like for safety extraction points along the trail. And so you can count them down from like 25 to 1. And so it's just like tick, 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 and that's super useful. And I felt like I got into Thredbo all right. Interestingly, I'm approaching Thredbo Village. There's all the other crews, because there's people already finishing, yeah? There's all the other crews, and they've got their cars and they've got their headlights on, and the headlights are like shining on the trail. And then I couldn't see where I was going because I was basically blinded, even though I had my head torch. And I got a bit rattled by that. And I actually said, guys, just turn off your headlights when I got a bit closer. I said, you're blinding the people coming down on the trail. Like, I know you don't get it, but when you're buggered, it makes a huge difference. At this point, my head torch was getting low and I didn't want to do anything about it. So I persevered because it was about 1.5 km into the aid station. At this point, it was starting to rain, not heavy though. So I'm in at the Thredbo Village aid station about 2 a.m. at this point. What I had learnt though is that I have to go up to Eagle's Nest and then back down to finish. And so it's 14k, but in the previous year it took me over 5 hours. And that is largely due to the conditions. Now, I knew that if the conditions during the day on the main range were windy, that wind in the early hours of the morning going up to Eagle's Nest would be wicked. So what I did is I actually put on, we knew it was going to be wet as well, so I put on my wet weather pants, I had my long sleeve top, and then so I put on my wet weather jacket and everything around, and I'm like, I've got to be ready for that conditions. And so I didn't feel like a lot of food, but I did have a yogurt pouch, refill of the water, and then up I went. Now you've got a situation where it's 5K kind of along and up a little bit, and then it's 5K straight up to get you to the top of Eagle's Nest. As I was leaving the aid station, it was starting to rain more. At this point, because you know what's ahead of you, like it's not something you look forward to, and you're tired, super tired. But at this point is when you almost channel your inner Goggins. Now, Goggins says, you're not finished when you're tired, you're finished when you're done. And I say this a bit myself. The overlay that David Goggins says is that when you think you're completely done, you're actually only 40% done. And I had this echoing in my head because I obviously wanted to finish the race, don't get me wrong, but the idea of going up to Eagle's Nest after last year was really far from appealing. But I reminded myself that it's okay. I've still got more in me. I can do it. If I did it last year, I can do it this year. And I was more prepared. So off I went, and it just started to get wetter and wetter. At this point, I did actually start to overtake some people. Even though I didn't want to be there, I was actually able to dig a little deep and just really focus. The only thing that rattled me on the way up was when there were some miler runners coming through and passing me, which is totally fine, but I didn't hear them, and they caught me by surprise, and then I kind of jumped a bit. And that kind of rattled me for moments. And so the interesting thing that I'm finding with trail running is that when people are passing, they're almost not talking to one another anymore. And admittedly, by this stage of the race, you're probably not wanting to talk. But I'm actually wondering whether or not, because you're getting a lot more younger people in trail running, whether or not this whole speaking face-to-face thing becomes like not something that's done. Anyway, just totally random, not a complaint, but just something that goes through your head, because really random things go through your head. The other really random thing that went through my head, and it's not random at all. So we talk about not stopping when we're tired, but we stop when we're done. And that when we think we're done, we're only 40% done. Okay, now if there's all that extra capacity, like where does that come from? And that's what went through my head at this time as I'm going up Eagle's Nest in particular. Like, is it something we force? Or is it something we surrender to get this additional capacity? And I really think that it comes from surrendering. Like this extra capacity comes from believing, like, yes, in ourselves, but for me, this extra capacity came from believing that God's got my back and that it's not me forcing this through. It's not all about me, right? There's a bigger purpose at play. Like, I'm supposed to do this stuff so that you can see that, this average person pushing 50 that didn't start running till her late 30s can do this stuff. But I do this because I surrender to the ability that God gives me to get it done too. And it's really fascinating for me, like in observation after the fact, to say, hey, it's when I surrender that I can keep moving forward. And so I'm taking away the resistance. And so for me, That's a super important part of me getting the job done, is knowing when to surrender. Now, I kept going, and as we were getting up towards Eagle's Nest, the rain got heavier. The mist came, and you couldn't really see where you were going. There were another 3 sets of snowdrifts up the top there, and so you're slip sliding around, but you're not really seeing. There are other people, but you don't really connect with them because you can't really see them. And then all of a sudden I end up on the path to make the right turn to get to Eagle's Nest. Now, my plan here for Eagle's Nest was just to push through and go down and not stop. That was my plan. But even though I had the extra gear on, I still felt a little bit too cold when I got to the top. And so my experience from 2024 was I hadn't had enough clothes on, I hadn't had enough gear on, and I actually got too cold, and I had to spend time at Eagle's Nest getting warm before I could go down. This year was different. Main part of the reason I went inside is I needed to go to the bathroom. I was also feeling like I could do with a change of gloves at the very least. So inside I went, bathroom, and then I had decided that I was going to put on an extra long sleeve layer. And again, this year, the Eagle's Nest water point with the medical station was full of people that hadn't rugged up enough to come up and had super, super chill, and they were under their space blankets. They're sitting by the fires and trying to warm up before they went down. For me, I was up, bathroom, I changed my gloves and I put an extra long sleeve, and then I was straight out. And that was good. Now the rain, keeping on going, guys. The rain at this point was keeping on going. The one thing I was super happy about is that compared to 2024, the rain was really only for the last 4 or so hours, which was much better than the year prior. The good thing about going up Eagle's Nest was that you could see that they'd made repairs to the trail, and the trail was in really good nick, and I was able to climb pretty good. So tick, tick, tick. Now, last year when we were coming down from Eagle's Nest to the finish, it's only about 3.5K, but it takes you a good hour and a half. It takes me a good hour and a half. It is down like this. We've got stairs, but they're really deep stairs. And again, this year, because of the rain, they were full of mud and there'd been no repairs on this section of trail. It was a really, really tough trail to come down. And so I'm basically jumping down, splashing in the mud, using my poles, going as fast as I can. But at this point, there were people like going heaps quick past me. And they were mainly guys that were taller. And so I'm thinking in general, those stairs weren't as huge a deal for them. So here I am jumping down the stairs all the way down. And I'm feeling a bit miserable at this point. I just want to get it done. But I'm like, the mud got to me. The stairs got to me, even though I knew I was almost done. I didn't feel good until we got to the wider fire trails towards the bottom. And then I could also hear the finish line, and I also knew that there were no more stairs. And once I knew that there were no more stairs and no more muddy stairs to get down that were crazy heights, I felt an utter sense of relief. But I was in all my wet weather gear, it was still raining down, and here I came, and I was starting to feel okay. Now, as I started to run down the hill and get closer to the finish line, you can start to hear people down there. You start to see the finish line. Now, as I had left Eagle's Nest, the daylight was happening, which was great. So by the time I got down to the bottom, it was head torch off. It was daylight. It was great. So I've got my poles. I'm just going as fast as I can, which isn't really that fast. Anywho, and off I go. you get into the finish chute and there's like puddles of mud. They'd put different bits of like bark and mulch to try and soak up the water. And I'm just like running through the water at this point. I didn't really care. It was great. And it's like, yay, Leslie, they cheer your name out. And instead of getting like all that teary emotional, which I had the last couple of years, because particularly last year when it felt like it was me versus the conditions, I got very emotional about finishing it. And then in 2023, because I'd been cut off at CCC due to time, finishing Kosci was particularly emotional. Today I was just happy. Today I was just relieved, and I'm like, yes, I got it done. I also knew that I got it done a couple of hours faster than the year prior. And then there was music, dancing. There was someone I knew called me across the line and goes, go Leslie. And then there was some 90s music playing, so I did like a little dance. It was cool. I got it done. And then I just started chatting to people, and then hubby's like, hey, over here. So in the end, you've got the ups and downs of the elevation of the race. There's the ups and downs of the emotion. I'm going to keep doing it, right? I will be back for Kosci next year because, it's the 5-peat. I've done it 4 times. I'm going to do it 5. And then I'm probably will keep going. Shh, don't tell anyone. But, we need to be like the dogs playing in the rain, jumping in puddles, playing with the wind, finding joy. When do we surrender to find that extra capacity in ourselves? Even the crows playing in the wind, right? Some of what I described is moments of surrender for them to where the wind is taking them. They never look stressed or panicked in that moment of surrender. But I find that each time I go on the trails, so Kosci is my favourite part of the world, right? I've been going there since I was a little girl. I caught my first fish in the Thredbo River. But each time you do these ultras, like I learn more and I love learning more. But the thing is, yes, I absolutely learn about how to handle the distance and how to handle the event. But I learn how to handle me, which is a particularly valuable life lesson. So if you want to do some more of that, you know who to reach out to and stuff like that. But, it's better when we don't do it on our own. So let's do the events. Let's just put our hands up. Let's keep running the high. Let's keep doing hard things. And remember that we don't have to do hard things on our own. We say, yay, hills, we've got this. And, I'm not finished yet.